In our modern world, where screens dominate and the lines between reality and the virtual blur, a new kind of fear is born. It's not the fear of classic ghosts or monsters, but a fear that feeds on daily anxiety, work pressures, social media, and the feeling of isolation despite constant connection. This is what Team Shadow, a group of content creators specializing in mysterious phenomena, discovered. This time, they were the prey. It wasn't a traditional invitation, but an encrypted message speaking of a unique phenomenon in an abandoned building on the city's outskirts, known as the Silent Lab. The building was old, abandoned for decades, but rumors about it were plentiful. Secret experiments, mysterious disappearances, and cases of madness that afflicted its last workers. The message promised unprecedented content, which particularly enticed Sarah and Laith. But when they turned, they found nothing. Stay in the black room. There you will find your answers. It was immediately followed by a distorted image of a chillingly smiling face. This was the mysterious blogger Kyle, known for posting strange information about abandoned places. Then, the room's walls began to glow with a very faint light, revealing primitive drawings of strange creatures, as if trying to call around something in the center. It fed on their fear. The more anxious they became, the stronger the entity grew. But from the air itself, I am your pulse, your anxiety, your despair. Adam tried to activate the emergency transmitter, but the devices melted in his hand, leaving a foul burning smell. Don't be afraid, it wants to understand you. You can be strong with me. Her eyes were staring into space, and a terrifying smile began to form on her face. This was the digital disappearance scene, the entity consuming him and converting him into part of its system. They realized the entity had infiltrated her mind, using her as a facade. He gathered all his courage and focused on indifference. Suddenly, his hand began to dissolve into mist, followed by his arm. Adam screamed, while his body gradually dissolved into a blurry digital image on the surrounding screens, his arm bones transforming into skeletal structures covered in electronic wires protruding from his skin. His last scream was merely a metallic hum. Noah was psychologically exhausted, while Laith was composed but changed forever. She was trying to lure the others, to make them surrender to fear. Through the possessed Sarah picked up a metal scissor lying on the floor. The black room began to be illuminated by the faint daylight coming from cracks in the ceiling. The message reads, "It's here, with you." Laith sees his reflection in the mirror, smiling with the same grin as the entity. He began to imagine that nothing mattered, that these fears were merely illusions. The entity began to weaken, its voice becoming distorted. And each call, they heard the voice of a missing person asking for help. Then a message appears on the screen, written in the entity's own handwriting. "Fear is my food, and you are always hungry." Laith opens his phone and finds a new message from Sarah. Sarah had been an illusion created by the entity from the beginning, to monitor the team and manipulate them. The entity was inside Laith. The live stream footage they had captured in the lab began automatically broadcasting on other channels, even after the original video was deleted. News reports online began to speak of sudden mass suicides due to unexplained digital hallucinations. The entity was spreading, feeding on global fear. They had faced an inexplicable entity, one that fed on humanity's weakest point, fear. They found no physical evidence of the entity's existence, but the audio recordings were filled with terrifying whispers and screams. "If we stop fearing, it will be defeated." The police intervened but found the lab completely empty, with a black, viscous layer on the walls, the entity's blood. The entity never appeared directly, but was only seen from the corner of the eye, distorted reflections in the window glass revealing the faces of previous victims. Laith began to feel sudden panic attacks from the simplest things. Noah began to hear whispers in her head even when she was alone, and Sarah completely stopped using social media, becoming reclusive. Each of them carried a part of the entity within them. The entity hadn't completely disappeared. It was now feeding on their internal fears. And the more they feared, the stronger the dormant entity within them grew. The more they moved, their reflections shattered into thousands of warped copies, each mimicking their movements but with an evil grin. It feeds on fear. The entity began to unleash concentrated waves of fear, targeting them directly. Laith saw his nightmares come true before him, and Noah felt her heart clench with despair. The entity was the spirit of an ancient scholar who practiced rituals to absorb human fear, then was trapped in the lab during a failed government experiment. It had different names in cultures. In Japan, Kaibuteki Ghost of Time, and in Mexico, El Cesarador, the Whisperer. It could cling to electronic devices and appear on any internet-connected screen, and create mass illusions that made victims see the same nightmares at the same time. Lath heard a voice telling him he would never be a successful leader. This was the mirror room scene. Noah saw her reflection slowly dissolving, turning into a pale shadow, while whispers in ancient languages began to be heard from the remaining recording devices, as if they were forbidden incantations. The entity moved her hand with uncanny force, and Sarah began to cut off her fingers one by one, while the entity whispered, "Every drop of blood, energy for me." It was absolute horror. He felt sharp pains, as if the entity was gnawing at his mind. The cameras began to show a dense black fog forming in the corners of the room, moving slowly. Then, spectral copies of the team members began to appear, moving with a faint bone-cracking sound, sowing doubt among them. Lath saw a copy of Adam standing directly behind him, while the real Adam was far away. The voices began to attack each person individually. Noah heard a voice reminding her of her worst fears of loneliness. Adam heard a voice mocking his technical abilities. And Sarah began to see illusory comments on her screen saying she was boring, and that her followers hated her. "Join me. All your fears will vanish," she whispered in a voice not her own. Lath tried to speak to Sarah, but the entity replied through her, "You cannot save her." Then they began to hear faint whispers coming from the dark corridors. "She has become my vessel, and your fears will become my food." It became clear that the entity was a failed government experiment to convert human fear into energy, and previous victims had become its vessels. The entity was manipulating the virtual reality on their phones, showing them their worst nightmares in the form of comments and images. This room was filled with old monitors, some of which were still working, displaying a distorted recording. The recording showed Dr. Lena, a researcher of negative energy, speaking about the entity and how it was not alone. Adam opened it with difficulty, revealing a completely dark room, devoid of any windows. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of dust and dampness, but part of a network of similar entities feeding on negative emotions. Every video in the room ended with a scream, then a faint whisper, "You are next." The room reeked of decaying frankincense, as if it had been used for ancient rituals. This unseen thing in the center began to radiate a terrifying cold. The air grew heavy, mixed with the smell of burning wires and ancient blood that hung in the air. The story began when they received a strange email invitation. Noah, who was examining the premises, felt a sudden dizziness, who would later be revealed as a former victim turned into the entity's tool. After an hour, the devices began to emit faint static. EMF screens showed unusually high readings. They weren't clear words, but distorted sounds, like negative thoughts echoing in their minds. "Failure. Alone. You'll never succeed." These whispers targeted their personal fears. A deep, slow voice began to echo in the room, not from the devices. Lath began to feel a strange pressure. Was it the anxiety of failure, or something else? Team Shadow consists of 4 members. Lath, the leader and cameraman, who believes everything has a scientific explanation. The building was a massive concrete structure, its windows shattered like empty eyes, while weeds growing from cracks in its walls. In one of the rooms, they found an iron door with an old lock. They entered a room filled with shattered mirrors, and the distorted faces of past victims appeared in their reflections. As soon as they entered, the doors slammed shut behind them. They had to confront their fears, not just defeat the entity, but starve it. As fear escalated, the black shadows began to take indistinct forms. As soon as they entered, they felt a chilling cold, unrelated to the ambient temperature. The entity fell to the ground, transforming into a black, viscous oil slick on the floor, then evaporated. Adam set up thermal and audio sensors, while Lath began filming, and Sarah live streamed on their phones. Noah, the team's psychological analyst, sensitive and easily picks up negative energies. Adam, the sound engineer and surveillance tech, who relies more on gadgets than his senses. And finally, Sarah, the social media expert, always seeking the most thrilling content. "I feel something, a massive negative energy. It's like the place is breathing anxiety." The team arrived at the silent lab at sunset. Sarah began receiving strange comments on the live stream. "I see something behind you. Who's watching you from the window?" Suddenly, a strange comment appeared on the live stream from a user named Chrono Whisperer. As midnight approached, they felt the presence grow stronger. Devices flickered and emitted strange sounds. In the pitch black, they heard nothing but their own accelerated breathing. They realized the entity wasn't physically attacking them, but psychologically. Sarah, who was still trying to broadcast, suddenly began speaking in a strange voice. In a moment of terror, a pulsating red light emanated from the corners of the room, revealing Sarah floating in the air, with black, vein-like tendrils forming on her face. Amidst the chaos, they found a secret door leading to another room. Adam was trying to repair some damaged equipment. Only Laith and Nua remained. The entity was not satisfied. Laith and Nua tried to escape to another room. Nua, who was trying to resist the psychological influence, remembered what she had read about psychological entities. Laith slowly began to realize. In a moment of desperation, Laith remembered Nua's words. Stop fearing. As dawn broke, the black fork completely vanished. Sarah was lying on the ground, conscious, but very weak, her eyes still bearing the mark of terror. But the entity had left her. They left the silent lab. The sun had risen, and the city seemed calm and normal. But they were never normal again. Most disturbingly, they noticed something strange happening to them after this experience. Digital spread. A few days after publishing their first video about the silent lab, strange calls began reaching them from unknown numbers. Laith sits alone in a dark room, staring at a blank phone screen.